We'll go from
Yeah.
here. Adi, welcome to my podcast. Hello.
Hey, Sergey, how are you?
I'm good. All right, awesome. Thanks for doing this because I randomly reached out to you over X, right? I just shot you a message to ask if you could do this. And the reason why is because you've been sort of, I don't know if it's developing out in public or however you want to call it, but I just saw your
Mm,
posts all the time. I started following you and I really enjoyed your journey. So I guess maybe we can start there. Um, what's your development journey?
mm,
Maybe with LLM specifically, right? Large language models, for those unfamiliar.
right.
And why do you post online about it?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, no, again, before I do that, thanks a lot for reaching out. I mean, actually, this has been very interesting. I didn't start posting for any specific reason, but then and connections do happen, and it's very interesting that people reaching out from different parts of the world. So that is very interesting. Thanks first for reaching out. Um, so the questions were, what was my developer journey with LLM, and why do I build it out in public, right? I'm not sure if I have like a strategic answer for it. It all happened organically in the sense I come from an engineering background. I was a developer for a long, long time, for quite a few years. But about, I think I would say November 2022, like everyone, I was kind of a little taken away with what the chat GPT and those things were doing. And then I started applying that for my own thing, started playing around with it, and I was really blown away. And I could immediately see that this is going to be a transformative tech. Um, and I thought I'm lucky. I was not around when I don't know, internet happened. I was still a young kid, or I was not around when silicon happened. And I think such generational tech shifts happen only once in a while. And I was not at all into AI. I was never into AI. I did not know about AI, and I do not have any fundamental background in AI. But when that did happen, I was like, man, I knew right away that this is going to be a generational shift. And I started just playing around with things because I'm a hacker. And specifically, I love listening to podcasts, like you do podcasts. I really like listening to podcasts. But it so did happen that either there are so many podcasts that I want to do and I cannot catch up with them, or I'm listening to lots of podcasts. I listened to something 2 weeks ago, and I forgot what I listened to. So I said, okay, here is a problem, and here are these LLMs and Chat GPT things happening. Let me start summarizing them and using them to kind of purely for my own purpose. There was no grand plan there. And I did this for myself. I started summarizing podcasts, taking notes, slowly started sharing to friends. They thought that was cool. Then I started posting it in social media. I did this for quite a while, and then one or two posts became really viral for whatever reason. I do not know why. And and at that point, I realized, okay, there is something. It's not only me that thinks it's cool. Somebody else thinks it's cool too. And then at that point, I quit my job. Now I'm all in on the AI thing, and I'm trying to build a company around this AI and LLM things.
Interesting. So, a couple things about what you said. Number one, I guess we could start with what posts kind of went a little viral. I'm curious, which ones?
I mean, specifically, it was like I said, initially it was about, I was just doing summaries, right? I love listening to Andrew Huberman. I do not know if you know him. He's
Yeah.
probably the most popular health podcast guy. And there are many people that are passionate, some even fanatic about Andrew Huberman. Me too. I love listening to his podcast. Anyway, I took all of his episodes. I started summarizing them. Obviously, there were many summaries out there, but I did it slightly differently. I did it for myself, so I really cared a lot whether I would really like it. And then I started posting each of these summaries, but then I made one where I kind of summarized every 200 video, and they were top-notch quality, and I just posted it in Reddit and Facebook. And for a few weeks, that was the top post in the subreddit of Andrew Huberman. And somehow the website kind of went like suddenly there were lots of clicks and visibility, which took me by surprise. But that's where it kind of started. Andrew Huberman summaries. I'm doing this for myself. Then I started sharing to social media groups, and it became viral there.
What's the, if you don't mind, what's the technical I guess, process that you do to in order to summarize a video. So you have a podcast in front of you. How do you go from something that's video into a summary output?
Yeah, I mean, the answer would look wildly different if you asked me 5 months ago and right 2 months ago and 1 month ago. It's been organically getting
Mm.
much better and better and better. Um, for two, I can give you would you like the snapshot of how it is right now or how it was a few months ago?
Oh man, I'd love to understand the journey. So maybe if you wanted to start with the furthest point back, and you can just give me high levels. If you don't, you don't have to give like all your secrets away, but whatever you're willing to
No, no, I
share.
don't mind. I actually don't mind. If you see my Twitter, I actually share everything that I do.
Yeah.
I think it'd be great if people can replicate and get into this. I genuinely believe in the open source movement. So broadly, I don't mind sharing things. Um, I would share then the backup point, but I would just tell you broadly why it's different. Like imagine if you have to just make one cookie, right? It's a different challenge than if you have to make 10,000 cookies. Um,
Mm.
when you're baking a cookie, if you have to just make one or two cookies, you have to just focus on the recipe, getting that right. But if you have to make 10,000 cookies, you still have to make a really good cookie, but there are different kind of challenges. That is the kind of challenge that I'm at right now. But let's talk about baking that single cookie. Which is because earlier I was just baking those cookies for myself. I was doing those summaries for myself. Um, at the beginning, I did not have my own LLMs, but rather I simply at the beginning I used ChatGPT. I plugged it in, summarized, and I kept talking to it until it became well. And since I'm a programmer, okay, I took that and then I started plugging in with replacing that with OpenAI APIs. So that was the genesis. Um, then obviously, so once it was I can go into more specifics based on how much you want it, but then I went into OpenAI APIs reading about how well to prompt it in the tone that I want, the things that I want. For example, if I'm reading about I'm skinny and I want to put on weight, I'm more interested in, hey, what do I have to do if Andrew Huberman talks to us about muscle growth? I just need the protocol at the end. So I kind of tuned those summaries for me, made those prompt engineerings. So the cookie process looked like that about 4 months ago. But it has rapidly changed and is much more matured. It's not only me that's asking for those cookies. There are 10,000 people that are asking for those cookies. And the process is, especially for the scale, it has totally changed now because I have to think about costs and yada and yada. But I'm happy to go into more details on which aspect that you want to.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go from, and maybe just to give you a quick background so you understand. Um, I've had a very similar journey. So I'm actually not a developer by trade, but I
Mm-hmm.
did kickstart my developer, I guess, aspirations back up right when the OpenAI API came out. Due probably to the same
Really.
reason that
But,
most
but
other
what got
people.
you into it, I wonder? So did you have a specific itch that you wanted to scratch, or was it just like that's it?
Yeah, I think it was really all of the above. I mean, first of all, obviously, just using ChatGPT for the first time, I was like, holy F. Like that.
Exactly.
I mean, like I literally messaged everybody I knew and I gave them links. I was like,
But
need to use this.
I'm curious now. When you message to your buddies, did they have the same I don't know, this wow experience, or what was the reactions like?
Mostly no, actually. There was only
That
like
was
maybe one or two.
sure. Isn't that surprising to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
It
find
was
it
very strange.
Yeah, I find it constantly surprising. Even until today, I show them what GPT-4 could do, or like DALI, like the images that it could produce, or all the voice to text and everything. And like, okay. So, well, to me, when I saw it first time, I was like, oh man. The same thing that you just said, but it's funny, like how people have different reactions to it. So,
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was absolutely magic, right? And I remember logging into ChatGPT the first time, and it was like, "Hey, it's a little tutorial about how this works, and the tokens get
mm,
predicted." And it meant absolutely nothing to me. I was like, "What is all this?" And
right.
as I started using it, I realized that it itself is the best teacher about its own architecture. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was literally the first thing that I dove into. So a lot of people, and this is I think very common, just would mess with it, right? They would like kind of philosophically or maybe like morally, throw little jabs here and there just to understand what kind of responses they
Yeah.
would give, try to put in a corner. I went
Yeah.
straight for the technical architecture. I was like, how do you work? What are you made of? And I was just like, just taking notes. And I was like, oh, okay. And I would learn about the neural nets, and then every time it was just absolutely incredible that I could say expand on step one, right? And I was like,
Mm.
my mind was just like blown away about the possibilities. I was just like, holy God, because I have a pretty abstract mind. I think, and I sort of I know I don't even know how to explain it, but essentially I've always had an issue of like putting the things in my head into reality. And with this
Mm.
device or this tool, I was like, I could just talk, or type out loud,
Mm.
like whatever I'm thinking, all my abstract thoughts and ideas, and he can capture that, format it, put a frame into it, and then I'll take it and put it in Excel, and then it's like organizing things for me. And that was the first
I
thing that I
it's
used it
it's
for.
it's really funny you say that. I wrote a tweet like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I wrote this exactly. I was musing on the day, which was that one of the greatest experiences of ChatGPT is not its intelligence. When you talk to it, it helps you structure your thoughts. It's like it's the next version of the journal, right? So you just brain dump your things, and it comes back to you saying that maybe you want to structure your thoughts like this. I find that amazing too. Just that exercise, doing that thing is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's so valuable,
Yeah.
and to me, I immediately saw that as like, oh, so like rather than being focused, I think that like on a specific like sector or specific thing, I more immediately took it into a data perspective. Like to me, it was like, okay, so data in, data out. It's
Mm.
structuring and formatting my input into a certain output, and it seems incredibly responsive when I give it plain English instructions to how it outputs something. So that was like the
Right.
development layer of it. I was like, wow, this is pretty interesting. And so when
Hmm.
I found out that they've got the API coming out, I was like, okay, I gotta kick off my old cobwebs because I did a little bit of schooling for development. I participated in a Microsoft-led academy for like 6 months. So it was like a full-time school,
Right.
and I learned like C sharp, oriented programming, a little bit of Python, JavaScript, just, but I had forgotten probably 95% of
Mm.
it. However, what I didn't forget was the structure, was the understanding, right? There's the general sense of like, okay,
Yeah.
this is what you need to do in order to, build an application. And from then on, whenever I looked at an app or whatever, I kind of, okay, so there's like a whole infrastructure. This is probably hosted in the cloud, server client side, right? So I didn't really like, I forgot the actual like how to do the code, like, like console dot write line, whatever. Like I forgot all of that, but all of a sudden I didn't need to know it because, the large language model knew all that, and I brought the knowledge of the network of the structure, and again, I was just going on a roll. Like I just nonstop just started thinking about applications, and one of the first things that I did was at work. I do a lot of data stuff, so
Hmm.
I'm a program manager, but what I have been focusing a lot is building like reports, connecting to databases, and really just transforming the raw data into something useful, into a business insight, into whatever it is.
Hmm.
And I've got pretty comfortable with that using tools like Power BI, even simple things like Excel. But I generally understand that there's a business, I mean, a whole giant world underneath the business. That's the data layer that needs a lot
Exactly.
of work, a lot of transformation, and it doesn't matter what
Yeah.
business you're in, healthcare, tech. It doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. You have this fundamental unit, right? A bunch of if you go down, enough, it's just a bunch of signals, which are a bunch of zeros and ones, which gets transformed into you know into the data you see on your screen eventually through a lot of
Right.
processing. And so for me, it was very evident that it's not that you can have this back and forth chat where it can answer you and can do this stuff. It can be probably plugged in somewhere in the programming level in order to manipulate and change things around from a user input. That's what interesting
Right.
to me. So back to the data, I was like, it'd be great. I was like, why can't I just ask this thing? Because I was building out this report that was taking like 10 hours. I was like, why can't I just ask this thing? What were my sales in 2022 in this region or this
Right.
area? Like, why can't it just do that?
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? It probably can do that. And then I was like, I don't know how to do this, but I'll just figure it out. I went to ChatGPT and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to
Yeah.
have a large language model transform what I'm saying into a query for my data, send it to a database, give me back the answer, feed it back to a large language model so that it could intelligently answer me in contextually, right? So it's not just like a splat of data.
Right.
And then it was like, oh yeah, you can do that, no problem. And here's this step by step, and I was like, great. So I downloaded all the Visual Studio, whatever it is I need to do. I just got to coding, and so that's a little background of I'm relatively familiar with all this, but the real superpower here, I think, is people like me who have an intuitive understanding about what it's like to create an application or program, but maybe they just don't have the actual programming knowledge, which used to be generalized. So you used to be like, I'm going to take a Python course, I'm going to do a C
Yeah.
sharp course, which is really great. However, there's now a new way to do things, and that's I have a general idea of what to do. I'm going to go get the code. And before, you used to do that in like Stack Overflow or whatever, but now you can do it in this very, very specific sort of streamlined way. Long story short, you can, let's try to dive into the technical details. If you don't mind, I would love to hear about your journey from API to a local model. Take me through that, how, because that must have been beautiful. I have yet to take that step, and so I've been
Mhm.
developing with an API. However, I've bookmarked probably 1,000 X conversations on open source. Like I have a whole list of open source models, what they do, and every week a new one comes out. Haven't
Right.
done it, but I 100% will. So I'd love to hear from your perspective how that was, and what you're doing with it now.
Yeah, the best way to do it is just jump in, man. Like you said, like even like when there's a pain, just try to solve it. Um, in general, I would just recommend to jump in, but specifically for me, I can talk about it. It was very similar to you. OpenAI was this big bang, right? Like that opened our eyes. But then I started using the APIs. But you will quickly realize two things once you start using API. You can use the 3.5 Turbo, which is incredibly great at doing simple tasks. Or you could use 4. When you want some complex reasoning over your data, you typically want to go for 4. If you don't want any hallucination, and especially if you don't want to proofread it, you're just mostly sure and you want to just send it out, you want to use 4. At least when I started out, those were the only two things that I knew, like plug in 3.5, 4, prompt engineering, blah, blah, blah. Quickly, my credit card bill quickly went up and up and up. So one issue was definitely cost. Um, and then I started. So the journey is the next step was obviously, hey, I don't want GPT-4. I want the same cost as 3.5. Let me just how can I do this? I still wanted to stay in the OpenAI world because I was just very comfortable and that was my comfort zone. So what I did was started fine tuning 3.5 to be as good as GPT-4 in my different use cases. I also made a Twitter post, and I think this was one post that also went viral, where I kind of showed even with fine tuning, OpenAI is insanely expensive. If you have used it, so fine tuning the 3.5 turbo models and then doing inference on top of it was very expensive. So it was very organic. So on one side, I had like more people asking for more and more summaries, and then I had to solve this at scale. If I have to solve this at scale, I don't want to. like I was not yet making revenue, so I wanted to keep my cost as low as possible. And then I switched to 3.5 fine tuning. I saw was still expensive. Then I stumbled onto this thing called Anyscale. I do not know how, but they offer the same kind of experience that OpenAI offers, but with open source LLM models. So you can use llamas, you can use Mistrals, and you can also choose between those 13B, 7Bs, or 70Bs. So you have this choice of flexibility on how much cost you're willing to pay and how much you, and they also have a fine tuning endpoint. Initially, I don't have a strong intuition, but when I went there, I was like, the open source models couldn't be as good as OpenAI's, right? So, but then this was the most surprising thing, and that was the viral post that I was talking about. I fine tuned. I had close to 50 million tokens for a very specific use case. That's a lot of data. I had collected it, cleaned up, and was an absolutely good quality data set. So that was not the issue. The issue then was spent close to $900 fine tuning 3.5 for one use case. That's a lot, right? And
Yeah.
then you start inferring that is, and again, that's a lot. Then I said, okay, fuck it. So let me just try fine tuning an open source model with this any scale endpoints. It was still not, I didn't have to spin up my own GPUs. It was still managed in the sense they offer an API, but you can use open source models. I did that. And to my surprise, I was able to get the same performance as fine-tuned 3.5 or GPT-4 fine-tuned 3.5 with open source fine-tuned models. And that was the aha moment for me. Oh, I'm not tied to OpenAI anymore. So there's a vast world out here that I could potentially explore and bring especially for my use cases, scale is huge. I pump out a lot of content and I need to do this inexpensively. So that was the primary cost driver. The primary factor. But then I found that I'm not losing out anything in performance and it's cheaper. Obviously, I'm going to go there. So then I made the switch from 4 to 3.5 fine tune to open source fine tune and inference, but still managed, right? And I'm somebody else like OpenAI, like any scale, they're still a vendor. They're managing it for me. I'm very happy with that so far because I can still focus on the other things, but I'm also moving more and more. Like the next stage is spinning up my own GPUs on cloud, doing my own training, like building up the LoRa adapters and yada, and completely managing that entire cluster by myself. So the next stage, and the stage after that is just having a server rack of GPUs at my apartment and running that on myself. Right now, I'm at that stage where my almost all of my stack are slowly moving away from OpenAI to managed open source endpoints, and I'm already also exploring. That's very wild. Like I just bought a GPU a week ago, and I'm exploring already how to bring those there, and I'm seeing whether it's actually worth the effort. So that's the journey. It's been very organic. It's primarily pushed by pain points, costs, and things like that. Happy to delve deeper into any of the topics that you want.
Okay, very cool. And I've sort of mapped out this journey in my head too. I know that's
Yeah.
kind of where you need to go, and I'm wondering how many other people are kind of in the same boat. The OpenAI API, the reason why it's good to at the very least start with it, I think, and let me get your thoughts, is obviously they're the leaders of what's excellent, right? So you don't want to lose, it's like in a sense you don't want to lose touch of like what it's possible. So like even if you move away from it, I'm curious, do you still like, a new feature comes out, like, you know, when Dev Day was around, right? The 128,000 token context and the cheaper and the turbo, like, oh man, I bet, did you jump on that and try it out as well? Because turbo is so
Absolutely,
quick.
man. They they are the, I mean, discounting what happened the last week, the big drama, right? So apart from that, they are the leaders. And I'm always watching out for, like, I have the OpenAI that is the only notification that's pushed to my mobile. In the sense, that is the only notification that I do. And in regards to your point, absolutely. When the dev day came out, I did this narration thing where like you give a video in that it kind of I plugged in the vision endpoint, it kind of understood and it narrates like a director's cut. I did that too. I love to play around. They offer things. Um, Definitely, it's fun to play around. And I would still say, whenever I want to prototype something, GPT-4 is the first one that I go to because almost always it understands me in two sentences. I don't have to write super long prompts, and I can almost be guaranteed the hallucination is less than 3%, yada yada. And I don't have to do lots of other things. If it's a one-off, or if I just want to get quickly prototype something, I'm still going for GPT-4 even today. But when it starts moving to scale, and I want to really look at that, I want to do this like for 10,000 and like really big. It's mainly the cost. If GPT-4 was cheap, like those open source, I'll definitely use GPT-4. But it just happens that it's expensive. In those cases, I do. Um, but you're right. Like it's awesome. The endpoint is still great, like insanely great. The vision, the TTS, the text to speech, everything is really great.
Yeah, for sure. So, GPT-4 aside, and I guess we should quickly mention this is right after all that OpenAI. I don't even know what you call it, right? The I don't
I
know
don't think,
whatever
I'm
happened.
not sure if we'll have a name for it.
It is in and of itself, though, still showing that they are the leaders, right? Because it's like the company and the mission all just stayed glued together through that whole process, which is absolutely crazy. I saw people comparing this to how Steve Jobs left. I was like, no, that's literally the opposite of what
Yeah.
happened. When Steve
Yeah.
Jobs left, everybody voted him out. and,
Right.
and then, right, this is much later that he kind of came back when they were in trouble. But this was like so quick. He was like from like, hey, you're fired, to we're back in like over the weekend
Tell me
almost.
about that. No,
Absolutely
it was insane,
incredible.
man. Crazy. It was crazy. Like I never thought. I used to always make fun of people who were into reality shows and follow gossips and all that thing. I was like, come on, why do you do that? But these last 4 days, my girlfriend was making fun of me always. It's like I was constantly glued to the Twitter, and I was just watching that because everything was happening on Twitter X, right? So it was crazy. And then I finally understood people. Oh, this is why people watch reality shows and dramas and stuff.
Yeah. By the way, isn't it amazing how over X, probably the only place on earth where all of that can be weaved together into like you piecemeal everything together, but like if you follow a certain story, like your algorithms, like, oh, some random person who works at OpenAI who has a side story that gets plugged in,
Yeah.
and then some CEO of some other place is like, oh, I know what's going on. Like, and everyone's like speculating. And in the middle, it's like this formulated narrative that's just kind of like it's almost like yeah, like you're saying, like a drama or a movie. But
Yeah.
it's happening in real time, and I think as soon as anybody finds out anything, it's posted on X first. What an absolutely incredible platform!
Yeah, I think many people will, especially this even for X, I think it was, I'm not sure if it had happened like this before. Imagine when, I don't know, when Steve Jobs was kicked out, if there was X and like, I don't know what happened, but it was very fascinating, like you said, to watch the entire, I'm not convinced on the entire, like the lack of transparency. Something is still a bit fishy, but anyway, I'm glad that they kind of sorted it out, and I think many companies depend upon the API. So I'm just glad it's done now.
Yeah, yeah. When it was down yesterday for a little bit, and it's funny because that could have been coincidental because it's been down before. But I was like, man, what timing? Because everyone's gonna be freaking out. Yeah, because you're right. There's so many products that sort of rely on it. Okay, so we can park that and back to your open source model. So you mentioned a vendor. So presumably, did you reach out to somebody like respectable, and they said, "Hey, we can train a local model for you"? Do they host it? Do you own it? I guess how did that process work out for you?
In my case, it was way simpler than that. I wanted to do as less work as possible, and I don't even know if they are the best vendors. All I was looking for is I'm looking these OpenAI endpoints. I already have the data. I fine-tuned it. I don't want to change anything there. So I wanted a vendor who was OpenAI API compatible, and I just wanted to quickly switch and test, spend maybe $50 or $100 and check. I was not ready for this investment. I didn't want to spin up my own GPU clusters. I didn't want to run my own training models. I wanted something that offered exactly OpenAI compatible endpoints that I can fine tune and do it. I just did a Google search on one weekend. That was in the top. hit, and I just went from there. So it was very organic in the sense it was not well thought through, or there was not big research. When I plugged in, it just worked, and I was surprised on how quickly it worked because I had to just change the API key and the base URL in the API endpoint. It worked, and I said, okay, now it works. Let me try. I tried, and then I was surprised, and then it went from there.
So,
So there
okay,
was
so
no. Actually, the reaching out happened after the I posted my findings, and that specific post kind of went viral, and then they reached out to me. So
I see. Okay, very well. So just to get this straight, because I haven't done this myself, right? So the way it went is you said I have some code. This code is built for the OpenAI API. So what I'm looking for
exactly.
is for another API that's probably cheaper, more affordable, but I can just plug and play, meaning whoever did this has created a model, they fine tuned it, they're running it maybe locally, maybe whatever, maybe they're using Hugging
Yeah.
Face, whatever it is, they're hosting it, they're owning it, but it's doing the same thing as OpenAI, and I can just use their API. How? So you said the
And
content
I'll
is
add on.
great. Sorry, go ahead.
I will just add on one thing to that, and it has to use the exact API endpoints. I mean, I didn't want to change anything in my code because it was very spaghetti already. There was a lot of code. I just wanted to switch the keys and it has to work. By that, I mean it should be an OpenAI compatible API spec. They use the exact API spec as OpenAI's.
Which is incredible.
Yeah,
Incredible that people have done that,
yeah.
right?
But I think it boils down to the point that you raised earlier. They are the market leaders now, right? So people do know that they have to make it like they have to make things easy, right? Like they talk about this in Atomic Habits. When you want to change a habit, you want to make that as easy as possible. So, in fact, if you go now, many they are not the only one. Like Replicate is doing it. Perplexity, their OpenAI, the API point is also compatible with OpenAI's. So they many are offering compatible AI endpoints because they know most of the developers come from there and they're looking to switch from that.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Thank you for the additional context. So you have now this setup going where you're just okay. Now, what did that like cost wise? How did that change for you? And also, I know that OpenAI has rate limits. It has tokens per minute, right? Which also are an impeding force for scale,
Yeah.
especially if you're using something very intensive, right? They'll hit this wall with X amount of users. How was that experience for you now using this compatible API?
Um, I still do have lots of endpoints that I have like close to like 8 or 9 models that are internally running, and still 1 or 2 or 3 I think are still running through OpenAI's, and some I'm switched open source mainly for the cost reasons. And in terms of rate limit, I I think I did the same thing when I did with OpenAI. I think I quickly hit the rate limit. Both, so if you use it, you will know that they only have like a monthly restriction. So you need to you can burn only so many dollars in a month. They do that to save you from accidentally running through your entire bank account. So for example, if you hit 1,000 euros in usage, they stop. They won't give anything more. So you have to request. So I did this already twice. So I think my rate cost limit is $5,000 per month right now because I hit it multiple times. Only when you hit that limit, you can request. I did it anyway 3, 4 times. They are pretty responsive on the thread. So that was with OpenAI. And at some point, rate limit was not an issue for me anymore because I was up there at like I was burning close to like so many dollars per month. Anyway, I got that. But I also had like a fallback to if I do hit the rate limit, I will either throttle or I would fall back to Azure endpoints. And I don't think any scale is, luckily, my system is not real time in the sense people are not waiting for it. It's more like blog publishing. So I can throttle my endpoints however I want to. Like I can run it overnight. So it's like a pipe with a fixed bandwidth. And I just run it at like the total bandwidth possible over a long time. And nobody is waiting for my input immediately. So that's one advantage of what I'm building. I'm not sure if that answered your question. I probably digress, but
No,
But
no,
yeah,
no.
I do not
That's
have any rate
perfect.
limit issues right now. So yeah.
Great. And what would you recommend for somebody who is dependent on that real time traffic and perhaps maybe not like the monthly rate limit, right? Say they're using a 3.5 or something API. What are some good options that you might be aware of for someone who needs high usage? So, like those tokens per minute, maybe is where they're
That's
worried
an
about.
absolutely good question. I myself am looking at it because I want to build like a I'm also moving into this real-time experience where I want to give a chatbot experience to my users on my content. So obviously that does play in. There are multiple things. The simplest thing is just write to OpenAI saying that increase my rate limit. And I don't know if you know, after Dev Day, they've already that you don't even have to request. So every time you hit like a spend limit, your rate limit goes twice. So there is like 6 levels. So if you spend $500, your rate limit is so much. If you spend 1,000, your rate limit increases automatically. So there is no more request to support or something. So it automatically switches every time you spend a lot. That being said, that is one. The dumbest way is just request them to increase the endpoints. But there are patterns that are emerging, right? Like you have in software engineering, there are patterns. So similarly, there are patterns emerging for rate limits in the sense you have fallback models. You keep hitting, and like the moment that you think it's a rate limit, you'll fall back to the next model, and then you'll fall back to the next model. And there are actually frameworks developing around this. They make it super easy for you. You just hit a call for them, and then you just say these are the three fallback models, and fall back to three, and then you can say, okay, even if those three all hit three hit rate limit, then just fail. So you can decide. For example, I use this Helicon, which is like a monitoring framework. I can watch how much I spent and like request. And they, I think, just last week released this. So many people are doing this. So that's a framework. So you can always fall back to different models. I mean, sorry, different vendors. I think those are the two things that I know, or at least I'm not deep into it. Probably there are much more ways to do overcome this rate limit, but those will be the two. Ask them to increase your rate limit and also have like a fallback logic. Have like access to different vendors and just have fallbacks.
Okay, makes sense. And so the vendors themselves have a similar. Do they have like the ones you're using, for example? Do they have like a token per limit or token per
Yes,
minute limit as well? Okay, interesting.
exactly. They almost all of them have. I think Azure famously does. I don't know if it was request per. Yeah, Azure does tokens per minute. Either they do requests per minute or tokens per minute. OpenAI does both. They constrain you on requests per minute and also tokens per minute. So it depends on the vendor.
Got
Yeah.
it. So okay, so the next steps for you. I know you've sort of alluded like technologically, but where are you imagining your platform to be if you have an idea, maybe beyond developing all the time and just seeing what's new? Do you have a goal set in your mind?
That's a very that's a super interesting question. In fact, that's the big thing that I'm deliberating about on 2 weeks. So again, to the story, right? Like I quit my job 3 months ago. This is the best fun that I've had in my like the best learning. I feel like I'm at the edge of something where people like even when I just show Chat GPT to people, they are taken away. Like, oh, this can do this. So, but I'm using this. So on the technical side, like you said, I'm having fun, and I think I'm also getting fairly good at it. But then there is a totally other aspects of things which honestly are not very energizing to me. Like things like I have to market my product. I have to bring people. I have to bring in revenue for either one to continue having fun by learning things and also building on top of this, but two also build this sustainably. And three also, if I want to serve my customers better, I need to make revenue. And I'm frankly, I'm not good at it yet, if I'm being very honest. And I'm actually trying to figure out how can I do this now? What can I build? Something that is of value where people, it's no brainer for people. When they look at it, obviously they'll pay for it. And I've not yet figured out that equation. And I'm actually going to stop, not completely developing, but my development is going to go close to 20%. I'm going to increasingly focus on marketing and I will not continue doing this if I don't make revenue and it's not sustainable, like the entire thing.
Right. Yeah. Now you got a whole business to worry about, right? And that becomes
Exactly, exactly.
complicated. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
that's a
sure.
totally different thing. At least it's not natural for me because I'm an engineer. So building things comes naturally to me and it's energizing. But the rest is something that I need to, let's say, push myself to do it, to sell and to market and like money. And I'm a very, I like money. I like eating good food. I like being in a nice place, but that's about it. And I would love it if I can just continue building what I'm building. But for that, I need money and I want to continue to serve people. And for that, I also need money. So I need to figure that out. So it's a necessity.
Okay. Well, maybe we can talk in a few months from now and you might hit some other sort of breakthrough, right?
That'd be awesome. Indeed. Indeed. I mean, either way, either I'll fail and I will learn, or this will just go on and I will learn too. So
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, let's see, right around the time where we scheduled to stop. So let's call it here. Thank you, Adi, for so much for being on the podcast. I loved hearing about your journey. I'm looking forward to what you do next here.
thanks a lot, Sergey. Thanks. Good luck to you too. Are you planning to build a business? Continue this podcast? What are you like? So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good question. I'm looking for a way to monetize this whole thing as well. Maybe
hmm
here offline, I could share with you some of the stuff that I've been working on. I can take a few minutes here, maybe here, and then podcast wise, yeah, I'd love to interview more people who are in this kind of space right now because I'm equally as energized and excited about it. And before I had a very
right,
general
right.
podcast where I'm literally just sitting down with my buddies and I'm just chit chatting about whatever, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but this seems like a good direction to start turning towards, just because this is what I'm into. This is the community that I see online is building incredible things, and I know that this is dynamic. This is gonna change in a month, 2 3 months. So that's the super exciting part for me, is following this
Believe
journey.
me, you're in the right place. You need to do it because not many people are doing it, and it's very interesting. And if this thing takes off, you have a niche here. Like not many people are doing it, but people want to know what others are up to. It's an interest. Like definitely a lot of potential here. I wish you luck. Yeah,
Thank you, and you better do a podcast summary of this after I
absolutely.
release it.
I can send you. I can send you one. I can do a free one for you for all your podcasts. So and then you can see what all you were up to the
Oh
last
wow,
few.
that's
Yeah.
that's an incredible offer. Thank you, I appreciate it. All right, well, thank you for your time. I'll see you next time.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Sagar. Thanks for
All
reaching out.
right,
Bye.
thank you.